Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. So I have this stack of books to talk about today, so that's fun. Okay, well, so the main reason we're here, one of the reasons we're here, is that we are kicking off a couple of weeks of me like being places and doing things. The US version of One for My Enemy is coming out on tomorrow. So yeah, so this is available tomorrow. I'm very excited. I think that if you follow me on social media, which you probably do if you're here, you've seen the beautiful end pages by Last Draws. And we also have, of course, classically gorgeous little Kimura interior illustrations. I'm so proud of this book. I think it's so beautiful. I also think it's like very cute. I've mentioned this before. Okay, so today, Monday, I'm doing a virtual event. Join me in your pajamas for group therapy at it's 3 p.m. my time, so 6 p.m. Eastern. And I'm talking with Kat Ward. This is the paperback of Sundial, which I am so excited to have. I think it looks really cool. It looks really, really different from the hardcover, which I also have. But I love this book. There's a lot of trigger warnings. There's a thing going on in here that's like sort of allegorical. But I think with all horror, you kind of have to be open to like weirder and darker stuff happening all the time. But personally, I think that this book is like weirdly uplifting, and there's a character in it that's hilarious and I think about all the time. But so her book that's coming out in April, it's called Looking Glass Sound. I've talked about it before. It's amazing. I've mentioned before that I think that if you're into dark academia and that like sort of toxic friend group, like weird sort of line between platonic and romantic, and like I think you'll be really into those vibes. There's something I think is particularly cool, just as a craftsman. I feel like the book has a really interesting take on like autofiction and who actually owns a story, which feels very timely. If you were paying attention to like the cat person discourse that happened last year, and I just think it's very interesting. Yeah, who owns a story is kind of like the undercutting theme in it, but it's also like a very haunting in a great way book. Like very, to me, it's the most psychological of her works. So yeah, I love her. She's so smart. She's one of those people that you listen to them talk and you're like kind of in love a little bit or a lot of it. That's first. And then on Tuesday, I will be at Barnes & Noble in Huntington Beach in person. It will be just me. So I'll probably be doing a little reading. Speaking of the Barnes & Noble version, it has an additional story at the end, which I'm not going to tell you. But yeah, it's called Love Language. It's domestic fluff. I'm going to cover up this part where it says who it's about because it's kind of a spoiler for people who haven't read it yet. But anyway, yeah, that is available in the Barnes & Noble exclusive. So anyway, I'll be doing a reading, I guess, and like talking to myself, which is what I'm doing right now. So you'll know I'm really good at it. And then the following week, I am doing some events with other authors, which I'm so excited about. So first, on Tuesday the 11th, I am doing an event with Emily Tesh, who wrote Some Desperate Glory. I'm so excited to have a finished copy of this. I've been begging and begging and begging for a year. I read an electronic arc on a plane and just like wept. Like over a year ago. And I was like, please, can I have a hard copy? Just because I need my husband to read it. I need to talk to somebody about it. That didn't happen. But now it's about to be released, and now I can talk to you guys about it, which is great. You have to kind of go along for the ride, emotionally speaking. Like you just have to be there for the characters and their journey. And I've heard other people talk about, like, I think the idea is that the main character, I think it's Kerr, because her full name is Valker, so Kerr. I bet it'll sound better when Emily Tesh says it. It's a space opera, which I don't typically like because I don't like descriptions of places, which like when you're doing a space opera, you have to do. This is why I will never write a space opera, because I don't want to tell you what things look like. What I was saying is that a lot of other people who read this book, and even I think the publishers are like, yeah, Kerr, she's terrible. Like she's just the worst like anti-hero and you don't like her at all. And then you sort of fall in love with her or / root for her. But I kind of knew right away, maybe this is me, maybe it's just because all of my characters are so unreliable and like highly, highly questionable as people, that I sort of understood that Kerr was lying to herself a lot. So I loved her right away. I was like, oh my God, something crazy is going to happen to her for sure. So I was all in right from the start. But anyway, you're going to feel a lot with this book. If you read One for My Enemy and then read Some Desperate Glory, you can have like a nice long day of tears by yourself. It'll be great. And then on Wednesday, I have an event with V. Schwab. Classic. I just find this so crazy. Like I'm gonna sit with V. Schwab. We're gonna talk to each other. I'm gonna look her in the eyes and use full words in English. I'm a big fan. I love like Shades of Magic. That trilogy is like probably my like. I feel like Neil Gaiman and V.E. Schwab are just like, they're just such my heroes in the way that they write fantasy and their like brand of creativity, which to me is very similar, even though it's different. And their careers are just really exciting to me. They're like, Anyway, we're celebrating the paperback release of ADDIE LARUE, but obviously this is not a paperback. This is the illustrated anniversary edition that I got from the UK. Did you know that Blackwell's ships for free to the US? I did not know that until I bought this book. I often order from Waterstones, usually when I'm ordering several books at once, and then I just happen to get this one, and I'm really excited about it. Anyway, so that's my April. That's what we're looking at for April. And then I have a few other things that I wanted to talk about. Let's see. Some things that recently came out. Assassin of Reality is book 2 of Vita Nostra. I feel like I might have already talked about this book. Okay, so book 1 is so like, it's so crazy. It's totally nauseating, like in the best way. Just following what's happening. It's so complicated. Vita Nostra, you just kind of have to like submit to whatever's happening. It's not just big brain, it's huge brain. And it's like very confusing, but I think that's like part of the atmosphere. It's part of the ride. You know, everybody's confused, including all the characters. And you just have to buy in. I did not realize it's a trilogy. It's a trilogy. And once you like, initially I was like, how are they doing a book 2? I don't understand, because I felt like thematically, I wasn't sure how they were going to move forward. And I think it's in book 2 where you really, like the book is starting to show its soul. Like not that you couldn't find it in book 1. Like in book 2, you can see the series heart, and it feels more like, it's still nauseatingly confusing, which I'm using as a compliment. It's still nauseating, don't worry, but in a way that feels a little more human. I write words for a living. Okay, I'm currently reading Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong, which I'm super excited about. It's very it's got a really cool like futuristic quality to it. You may know that it's about, like, it's Mark Antony and Cleopatra as the inspiration, but it feels like the characters like jump in and out of bodies. It's got this very like sci-fi feel to it, in a very like, it's almost cyberpunk, I would say. It's not really the Hunger Games, but it's kind of the Hunger Games in that there's like a big game. I'm really enjoying it. I'm having a really good time. And it's very action-packed. I think that if you've read Chloe's work in the past, you are like, you know what you're getting into here. You get the same kind of like banter and it's sort of the attitude that the characters have. They're all very cool. So yeah, look forward to this for sure. Oh, Assassin of Reality is already out. It came out in March. This is coming out, I want to say summer. July 25th. YELLOWFACE. This is coming out in May. You have probably heard about this one. It's really good. I would say that all of, it seems sort of like Rebecca jumps from subject matter to subject matter because she went from the Sino-Japanese like underpinnings of the Poppy War to Babel and like industrial London to now contemporary publishing. But I think that there is a consistency in the interrogation of power and who has power and in what ways is it corrupt and in what ways does it need to be examined. And this is like This is another nauseating read because the main character is so fascinating, and there are definitely times when you know you shouldn't root for her and you kind of want to, and then you're just like, God, why am I doing this? I will say that if you're one of those people who's like if I read this when I was still like deep in the query trenches, I think I would feel terrible about myself and have a really hard time with it because you know, it's about publishing from a publishing insider's point of view. So a lot of times there's moments when it's like, oh yeah, I think that the truest thing in here is that there's a few times when other characters will tell the main character, like, why don't you just stop trying with publishing? Like, why don't you just give up? And she can't, because like there's nothing that feels better than writing when you love to write. And there was just a moment of reading that's just like, yeah, basically everyone who's ever wanted to be a writer is going to understand every single thing she does in this book. Like the motivation for it is going to be just completely sympathetic in that one specific way. And then there's moments when you get reminded that like, yikes, it's really good. I would go as far as to say this is my favorite R.F. Kuang work. The Things We Do to Our Friends, I've got this very hot UK cover, even though I think it's very funny that they went like sort of, you know, femme fatale with the UK, and the US one has like flowers and stuff. I'm not sure which vibe seems more accurate. I think they both speak to the book in some way. Okay, so if you've read A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee, I think there's elements of that here. Again, I don't want to give it away, and I don't want to make it sound like it's derivative because I am about to list a lot of comps, but like if this is what you're into, to me, this book is a little bit of A Lesson in Vengeance meets Bitter Orange by Claire Fuller, meets Fates and Fury by Lauren Groff, meets Mean Girls, meets Promising Young Woman. You get all of that set in Edinburgh, and you have The Things We Do to Our Friends. It was this was a really quick read for me, kind of flew through it. There's a lot of stuff that like I want to talk about. Like I think this would be a great book club book because like I have a nature versus nurture question here. I don't want to give stuff away, but say, hypothetically, there was a character who was called a psychopath. I am not sure whether you would argue she actually is one, or whether her parents' treatment of her made her that way. So that's just a totally separate thing. I don't have anyone to talk about books with, so you guys are subjected to it. I just got sent Spring's Arcana by Lila St. Croix, which I'm really excited about. I took the Tor Books quiz. I take all the Tor quizzes because I'm like a huge Tor fangirl. Like I joke that now I'm like a company man because I write for Tor, but I also am I've always loved them and what they produce as an imprint. So I believe, and I believe I'm correct because you're the Baba Yaga feet. This is like, you know, it's relevant to One for My Enemy in that there's some Baba Yaga aspects in here. Yeah, American Gods versus Baba Yaga in this Russian-inspired contemporary fantasy. So yeah, and there, I think that the quiz said something about bringing my cool tattoos. I don't know, I remember cool tattoos, and I pretty much bought in. Okay, and then the last things, I am going on tour in the UK in May. I've talked about that before. I'm going on tour with Susan Dennard. This is the US copy. Yes, I do own US copies of The Luminaries, which I love. I'm also reading a book that's coming out. It's called Unholy Terrors by Lyndall Clipstone. And it reminds me a lot of The Luminaries, except The Luminaries is contemporary. It's in not our world, but kind of our world. Suze has called it urban fantasy. Whereas Unholy Terrors is high fantasy, and it's about wardens, but it feels very similar. They're kind of monster hunters, and there's a curiosity about what's happening with the monsters. It's different and the same is what she's saying, uselessly. But anyway, I'm going on tour with Suze. Stuff like a bunch of tickets are selling out, so if you want to come, those links are below. Suze and I are going to be on a panel with TL Huchu on dark academia at Comic-Con, MCM Comic-Con in London. I have recommended this book before. The Library of the Dead is one I recommend to people who enjoy the science in the Atlas Six. It's got a very different vibe because the main character, the protagonist, is this like 14-year-old girl she's a ghost talker, and she's just kind of like on her hustle in Edinburgh. Like, she is really mostly concerned with paying the rent, and making sure her sister and her grandma are fed and stuff. And so she's really voicey. She's just a fantastic heroine, and like, she has this drive to do good, even though, you know, on the outside she's not concerned with other people. And so she's coming at it like the Library of the Dead. It's this like very, you know, academic secret society that Ropa, the main character, doesn't really have access to. It's another interrogation of power in academia and stuff, but also it's got a really interesting science aspect to the magic. So there's a combination of that like really academic style with paranormal voicey stuff. This took way longer than I thought. But I do have a few other things I wanted to talk about. This one I thought was particularly relevant. Body things. Do you have thoughts on women's relationships with their bodies, especially over time? I love your videos for their big sister advice, and I'm hoping to get more context from someone older. That's me, who has dealt with this for longer. I know that health is not measured by size, and that if you eat nutritious foods and move your body, it probably is considered healthy, but being slim feels like the ultimate societal goal, and anything less feels like I'm failing. Trying to ignore social messaging feels exhausting, but so does constantly considering my outward appearance. I'm especially curious if, having gone through pregnancy, you've noticed connections with your body's changing size and your mental health. Yes, I got huge while I was pregnant. I gained over 60 pounds. Which is way more than you're supposed to. I was basically all fluid, and I had really, really bad sciatica. So probably at least 2 to 3 days a week, I couldn't move at all, without any pain. While I was pregnant, I just hated everything. I was so depressed while I was pregnant, and I definitely think a lot of that was physical. Not just like body image, but the idea that I felt trapped in a body that wasn't mine. I would have dreams about screaming and stuff. You can definitely, all the videos that I filmed while I was pregnant are available for you. So if you want to hear about them in real time, there they are. And now, you know, dealing with my postpartum body, it's also different. I think that having a baby made me a lot kinder to myself. It made me remember that being desirable is not that important in the scheme of things. I think that in a lot of ways, my understanding of how to make my way through the world as a woman depends on me being desirable largely to men. While I was pregnant, men were very like, they ignored me in a really strange way. People would like bump into me while I was pregnant. It was like I was invisible. It was this very weird, like, it was a very weird sensation. I talk about this all the time, but I would like to remind you, in case you're like, in case you can relate to this, that the acceptance of a man does not actually take you that far in life. It always seems like it will. It always seems like that power is assigned to you if you are like, if you receive the approval of like men, but actually it really doesn't make a difference. Okay, because they can always take it away. Okay, so anyway, yes. So one of the things, and I was actually just having a conversation with someone about this, an older woman than me, because I also need help sometimes, a lot of times. I recently stopped nursing. I just weaned my son after 22 months of breastfeeding, which has really done a number on my body. And but also now that I'm not nursing, my body is yeah, my body is different. It's really crazy, and I don't totally understand how it works. And my periods are still very like upsetting to me physically. Pelvic floor pain. I would just like to point out once again that the abortion discourse, it's crazy to make it about the life of an unborn baby when it's really what it's about is like mandatory pregnancy, which is just like, no woman should ever have to go through this unless they choose it. It's just awful, and it stays with you forever. Like I'm just not, certain parts of my body are just never going to be the same again. They just never are. And you know, I think it's one thing for me postpartum to realize like it was pretty easy for me to drop the expectation that I would go back to my old body. Like I no longer have access to my previous bodies. All I can do is move on to what my body is going to be if I take care of it. Body image is particularly hard for me because I've always had like sort of a dysmorphia problem. Like I just said on Twitter the other day that I was really stressed about, like, normally it's easier now for me to be like, my body has done an amazing thing. It made my son, it fed him for 22 months. That's almost 2 years for those of you who don't speak, infant development. It made him, it fed him, it keeps up with him every day. I'm so grateful for everything my body does. And most of the time, I don't hate it the way that I used to, but I did hate my body a lot for most of my life. And once my son was born, I kind of realized, like, I have to change the way that I think about myself, and the way I think about my body, because I don't want to pass that on to my son. I don't want, like, it would break my heart to think that my son would hate his body the way that I hate mine. Like, after all the, after everything I went through just to make it, and how much I love him and every little part of it, and how absolutely perfect he is to me, to think that for even a second he would hate it it's heartbreaking. And so I kind of made this very conscious decision that's like, I am not going to be cruel to myself anymore, not even in my head. I'm not allowed to say things like, I hate my body or I hate how I look. Those words don't exist for me anymore. So that even if I do feel those feelings sometimes, I reject that narrative, and I'm no longer going to mythologize what I should look like. But it's a lot of work, it's not something that I believe at every minute of every day. But it is something that I think by consciously training myself to, like, to take those moments, I guess to be sort of, to get really new agey with it, to be a little bit more mindful in the moments where you do love your body and you are aware of what your body is doing for you. Because I think you're right. You don't need to I don't need to tell you how to take care of your body, but I think that what generally has to change with me and with women I know, and especially, like, even if you've never had a child and you're just thinking about getting older, your body becomes unfamiliar to you. Again, my face is unfamiliar to me. Sometimes I look at it and I don't understand what's happening. Like, time has started to move across my face. That's another thing about myself that I don't want to hate. I don't want to have those feelings. It's such a waste. This is the body that I get to have for the rest of my life. This is the body that's going to take me to all the, like, this is the body that allows me to do everything that I'm able to do. And I basically, when I'm feeling good or having that thought, remembering, like, how important it is that I accept what I look like and what I am able to do, holding on to that feeling for as long as I can and feeling good about it. I made a joke with my friend I was talking about, who is actually someone on my publishing team, because I do genuinely love my publishing team, that we were kind of joking, like, this weekend we're going to feel good about ourselves. We're going to feel good about our changing bodies and accept it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take it even smaller. Like, I'm going to feel good for 5 minutes this weekend. I'm going to feel really good and happy with my body, and with my mind and with myself. And maybe if I just keep doing it, I can stretch that into an hour or a full day. And I basically think it's not about feeling, everything is cyclical. I think especially as women, like, our moods are literally cyclical. Like, my body is different from week to week, and that just is what it is. And I don't think we have to become comfortable in a permanent way, but accepting that the permanent state is the positivity, like, that we are constantly, that we are looking at ourselves with an attitude of acceptance and kindness. I think that's really just the best that we can do. I just think that, like, the reality is, for me, that I'm the kind of person who has struggled with my body my whole life. I went on my first diet when I was 14. I have starved myself and thought it was normal. And there's a lot of things that I can look back on myself and be like, oh, well, that was certainly disordered eating, or disordered exercise. Like, I can look back on my behaviors and know that they weren't right and they weren't normal, but they felt normal to me because it's what the other women around me were doing, and it's what I felt I needed to do. I'm naturally sort of a dense and muscular person. And so, like, and part of it was representation too, that like there weren't women with my body type. Like certainly not that I could see when I was growing up, certainly not that I could see in the catalogs or magazine covers, you know. And of course I agree that we should see representation of a lot of different kinds of bodies, but there's still like, no matter how enriched representation becomes, there is still always this celebration of thin bodies that is different, you know. It looks, it is treated differently by art, by commerce, and I know it's hard to sort of find our place in that discourse. I think about that constantly, that I don't know, I don't think that I have the healthiest relationship with my body, and I don't know if I ever will, but I am trying. I am modeling, hopefully, I am modeling for my son the kind of behavior that I want him to have. That yes, of course, you want to take care of your body. You want to make sure that it will last you a long time. This is another thing that I never had before. I never thought of my body as something that I wanted to last, that I wanted to take care of it so that I would live a long time. I've talked about this before. But you know, I treat my body in a very different way now, and not like my body is a temple sort of thing, but I want my body to be there. I want it to be there for me and keep showing up for me, so that I can see my son do things. I can see all the parts of his life so that I get to still be here, and that there's all these things that I never really thought. I think when you're young, there's just this sort of need for acceptance and validation, and eventually, as you age, this is one of the best things about aging, is you start to understand that even if you receive those things externally, it does not change you on the inside. It's something that you have to come to terms with. Your body is never going to be the perfect body until you change your mindset about what perfection actually means. Yeah, and this is another really long answer. I wanted to answer more things. Okay, I'm gonna answer one more because this is easy. Someone said, do you ever look at fan fiction for any of your works? I was wondering how it must feel to read how other people write your characters. As someone who wants to write her own characters in public someday, I can't decide if I would love reading them or if I would avoid them. I avoid them because, well, so currently I've only ever seen fan fiction for the Atlas series, and I cannot read it because you know, for copyright reasons, I couldn't read somebody else's intellectual property and like separate it from mine. So I'm not touching it, but I also don't think that I would, because it's not for me. It's the same reason that I don't go into reader spaces, because they're not for me. They're not for authors, they're for readers. And I think fan fiction is also for readers and not for authors. So yeah, I don't think I would go into it. And I also think that I was a fan fiction author, so I understand that people are going to interpret things differently. And I'm not only okay with that, I love that. Like, I wrote the Atlas 6 with as much chemistry as hopefully you think there is, so that like the fan fiction writers could go crazy with it. Like, I think that once you write a book and release it into the world, it belongs to the audience. And certainly there are things that I would like to be there. I obviously had an agenda when I wrote things, and there is a meaning for me, but what another person takes from that book is theirs. And you know, there's something that's the sacred covenant between author and reader, is that I put things there for you to find, and if you find other things, those belong to you at that point. So yeah, anyway, come hang out with me this week. Anyway, this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next time.